Hi there! Today we're going to make a really cute mushroom hoop wall hanging. So you can use whatever size hoop you'd like, but mine is 6 inches in diameter. Alrighty, so we're going to attach 2 strands of 3.35 millimeter single strand cotton cord using a reverse lark's head knot. The cord length will vary depending on how large you want your wall hanging to be, but for my 6-inch frame, I'm using 40-inch strands of cotton rope. Okay, so once you have 2 cords on, we're going to attach our third one, but we're going to do this one a little bit differently. Make sure it's centered, and we're going to attach this one using a double half hitch knot. So the third cord is going to be our filler cord, and we're tying our double half hitch knots around this cord. And on a side note, if you find that I'm going too fast for you, you can always adjust the speed of this video by tapping the 3 dots on the top right corner. Or feel free to check out my knot tutorial playlist. Okay, so let's finish up this row and then I'll show you what to do next. Okay, so next we're going to attach a really long cord. Mine is 80 inches in length. And to attach it, we're going to use a vertical double half hitch knot. So place your cord behind your first strand. You want your short tail end on your left and your long tail end on the right. You make a loop on your right, wrap your tail end around and through the loop, and then you repeat one more time. I realize that sounds super complicated, but trust me, it's not. You're just wrapping it around a couple of times. So once you have your knot secure, you want to slide it up to the top. And then to make your second knot, we're going to tie a row of double half hitch knots with just the 4 center cords. Just make sure that you leave out the last cord. We're only tying the middle cords. And of course, to tie your double half hitch knot, it's just the same as we did in the top row. I have been asked several times what the difference between a double half hitch knot and a vertical double half hitch knot is. And this project is the perfect example of what the difference is. A double half hitch knot makes rows from left to right, whereas the vertical double half hitch knot makes rows going from top to bottom. You will see what I mean when we get a little bit further on in our mushroom pattern. Okay, so once you've completed your 4 double half hitch knots, with our final cord, we're going to tie a vertical double half hitch knot. So make sure your working cord, the long strand that you're working with, is behind the last strand of cord. And then make a loop on your right, wrap your tail end around and through the loop, and then repeat one more time. So for each row, your first and your last cord will be a vertical double half hitch knot, and then your centers will be regular double half hitch knots. Okay, so for the next row, we have to go back in the opposite direction. So working with the same long working cord, we're going to place it on the other side of the last cord on your row. And this time we're going to make a loop on our left, wrap your cord around and through the loop, and repeat one more time. So yes, it is the exact same thing we did in the previous row, only it's in reverse. If you're enjoying this pattern and you would love to give me some support, the easiest and free way to show support is giving this video a thumbs up. And if you want to give a donation to my channel, you can click on the Give Thanks button down below. I hope this goes without saying, but I really appreciate you being here and macrameing with me. Okay, so for our final knot on this row, it is a vertical double half hitch knot. Okay, so for our next couple of rows, they're going to be similar but different, as we're going to have to increase the size of our mushroom. And if you're making a larger wall hanging, you'll have to add more rows than just 2. Okay, so move your working cord up and out of the way. We're going to ignore that, and we're going to focus on these filler cords here on the outside. So just the first and last cords. To increase our row, we're going to grab another 40-inch strand of single strand cotton rope, and we're going to attach it using a reverse lark's head knot right on the end of our first and last cords. And make sure that it's a reverse lark's head knot because we kind of want it to blend in and look like a vertical double half hitch knot. It's really a sneaky way to increase our row. Okay, so add another reverse lark's head knot right at the end of this row as well. Once both are on there, we're going to grab our long working cord again. We're going to place it behind our first strand and we're going to tie a vertical double half hitch knot. I really like how when we're adding vertical double half hitch knots to each side, it really adds kind of like an outline to our mushroom pattern. I don't know, I thought it looked a lot more interesting than just having solid vertical rows. So we're going to tie double half hitch knots in the center, just the same as we were doing before, only we have 4 extra strands of rope. And as you're tying these, make sure you're tying them really close to your previous row. If they're too loose, you'll start seeing gaps between your rows. Alrighty, so let's pick up the pace, and once we get to the very end of this row, we're going to end it off with another vertical double half hitch knot. Okay, so move your working cord up and out of the way, and we're going to take the first and last cords and we're going to increase just like we did in the previous row. And just like our previous row, we're going to increase by adding 2 cords using a reverse lark's head knot. Now grabbing our long working cord, we're going to place it behind our last filler cord, and we're going to tie a vertical double half hitch knot followed by regular double half hitch knots in the center, and then of course ending with a vertical double half hitch knot. Now, since I'm using a smaller hoop, this will be my final row for the top of the mushroom, but if your hoop is larger and you want your mushroom to be larger, you'll probably have to add several more rows. Okay, so to create the stem of our mushroom, we're going to grab a really long strand of gray cord. We're going to fold it in half to find the center and place the center behind the 2 middle strands of cord. And to attach it, we're going to tie a square knot. So to tie a square knot, you make a loop on your left, and then with your right, you wrap your tail end around and through the loop, and then you repeat to the opposite side. So you make a loop on your right, and then with your left strand, you pull that behind and through the loop. Tighten up the slack, and then you want to slide your knot all the way up to the top or the base of your mushroom. Okay, so we're going to tie one more square knot right below this one. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to snip off our long working cord. We don't need that one anymore. And visually, it helps to see that it's short so we don't get it mixed up with our bottom strands. Okay, so now our first and last cords are going to be our filler cords, and we're going to tie double half hitch knots starting from the corner and working towards the center. And obviously the same thing on the other side. However, these aren't going to be regular double half hitch knots. So let me tie the first one here, which looks just the same as it usually does. But instead of dropping our cord, we're going to take our cord that we just used to tie our knot, and we're going to gather it into our right hand. And then with the next cord, we're going to tie around both those 2 strands. I don't know what the technical term for this method of eliminating our cords at the bottom here, but I like to call it a gathering double half hitch knot. Most knots are very similar, but there's just a different way of how you go about using them that makes it a different type of knot. If there is a technical term for this, please let me know in the comments below, but I'm going to go ahead and use gathering double half hitch knot. Okay, so I'm going to repeat the same thing to the other side, except we're not going to tie our 2 center cords. So for this project, I'm using fabric glue, but you can use hot glue if you like, it doesn't really matter. If I can find the link for this particular brand, I'll link it in the description box below. Okay, so you want to snip off all your ends, and you want it fairly short, but make sure that your knots don't slip off. And I'm going to apply a generous amount of my fabric glue to the ends. I'm going to do both sides, and I'm going to smear a generous amount and then join our 2 ends together. Next, I'm going to add another strand of gray cord. This one's shorter than the previous one, and I'm going to attach it using a square knot, just the same as we did before. So to finish off the stem of our mushroom, what you can do is continue on tying square knots if you like, but I decided that I wanted to tie spiral knots at the bottom. So once you have your additional cord attached, grab your 2 previous cords and we're going to tie spiral knots around all of our 4 middle cords. And if you're not familiar on how to tie a spiral knot, all it is half of a square knot. So instead of alternating which side your loop is on, it will always be on the left-hand side. I went ahead and snipped off our burgundy color cord in the center, and if yours happens to poke out through, what I do is kind of push it in with the end of my scissors. Once you get to the bottom, you want your cords behind our hoop, and to attach it onto our hoop, we're going to tie double half hitch knots. So now we've reached the point in this pattern where you have some options. If you wanted to, after attaching all your cords onto the hoop here, you can end your pattern here by adding lark's head knots of more gray to the bottom to add more of a fringe, and it would be more of a minimalistic looking hoop wall hanging. Or you can continue on and we're going to add a lot more razzle dazzle to this guy. What I like particularly about this pattern is you can go ahead and be as creative as you want or as minimalistic as you want. Okay, so to add a fluffy texture at the bottom, we're going to grab some scrap strands of green cord and we're going to attach it using the rhea knot. So to do this, you find the center of your green cord and you place it on top of the 2 center cords of your gray. And then you want to bring the 2 tail ends up and through the middle and slide it up to the top. This is actually an upside down rhea knot and you typically find them in weaving patterns. Alrighty, so I'm going to divide my gray cords in half and then I'm going to add 2 more rhea knots, 1 to each side. This is going to add a lot of fun texture that looks kind of like grass to the bottom of our mushroom wall hanging. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and wrap around my hoop, including the gray fringe at the bottom. And I find the best way to go about this is to tie a loose overhand knot, leaving yourself about 4-inch tail. I'm going to quickly pin my knot to my board so it doesn't go anywhere on me. And then with the 2 gray cords, we're going to tie double half hitch knots. So how I'm wrapping this is I'm working my way from the bottom center all the way up to the top middle, which means we're going to be wrapping this in 2 parts. Okay, so the purpose of the double half hitch knots is so that our rhea knots don't slide off the bottom. And now we're going to work our way all the way up to the top. And the knot I'm going to use to wrap it is going to be a half hitch spiral knot. And don't worry, this is the easiest knot you'll ever do as it's just a series of loops. So you make a loop and then you grab your tail end and you wrap it around your hoop. And that's all it is. You're just going to loop it around over and over and over again, and eventually it will start spiraling around on itself. And of course, if you just wanted to wrap it around regularly and then maybe use a little bit of hot glue along the way to tack it down, that's totally up to you. I decided to do half hitch spirals because it gives it kind of a vine-like look. Plus, I'm going to do something a little bit fancy with this knot later on, and it's easier to demonstrate with this rope than it is with yarn. Okay, so once we've wrapped our way all the way up to the top on both sides, I'm going to create our hanger by taking our loose ends and just tying an overhand knot right at the top. And of course, this step is optional if you would rather not have such a large hanger at the top of your wall hanging. You could always just snip it off and then dab a little bit of glue at the end so it doesn't unravel. All right, so going back to the bottom of our wall hanging here, we're going to untie those loose overhand knots that we had tied at the bottom, and we're going to join our 2 green strands together using 1 singular double half hitch knot. This really helps close it off and there's no gaps and just looks a lot more neater. Next, trim your fringe to the length that you prefer. I'm cutting mine at a little bit of an angle. And then taking a fine-tooth comb, we're going to brush it out. Once it's all combed out, make a few final trims to have it lie just the way that you like it. And then while we already have our scissors out, we're going to snip off our long little tail ends that are on the top of our mushroom here. And I'm going to snip it off, leaving just a tiny little bit of length. And I'm going to bust out my glue again, and I'm going to tack down the loose ends. And since I already have my glue out, I'm also going to tack down my fringe a little bit so that it doesn't end up drooping. Again, if you don't have fabric glue, hot glue will work just fine, or E6000. Alrighty, so now we come to the point where we're going to add all the little finishing touches and all the little details. With a needle and thread, I'm going to hand sew on some beads that make it look like our mushroom is speckledy. I'm only going to do a few of these beads as it is kind of tedious to hand sew on each bead. However, you can do as little or as many as you want. I'm also going to hand sew on some sequins to look like sparkly flowers. To add what appears to look like leaves, I'm going to use scrap pieces of green yarn and thread it through my tapestry needle, and then I'm going to place it right through random spots along our hoop. Once you have it through, to secure it onto your hoop, you're going to tie a double overhand knot. So I'm going to do this in several different spots and at several different lengths, and I'll show you what it looks like when I am finished. Ta-da! As you can see, I added a whole bunch of details onto this guy. The sequins really add a sparkle. It's really, really pretty. And to create the vine on the side, it was the same thing we did around our hoop, only I used yarn. Now the final thing I'm going to do is spray it down with a little bit of fabric stiffener. That way our fringe and everything doesn't droop over time. Now if you really enjoyed this pattern, I think you'll also love my 3D macrame pumpkins. I'll leave the link to that video on the screen now, and I'll see you over there.